Whoa. Yeet. Whoa. Whoa. Hey, hey, hey. Whoa. Ha. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. It's a macro Saturday. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. Hey. Hey. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. It's a macro Saturday. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. Happy to see you guys in here. It's the trade room, y'all. We got charts today. We go macro. We thinking big picture. Let's go now. Let's go now. Let's go now. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. This is about to be fun. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. It's a macro Saturday. It's a macro Saturday. We got things to talk about. It's a macro Saturday. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. It's a macro Saturday. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. Listen, like, subscribe, put your alerts on. I'm happy to see y'all here today. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. It's a macro Saturday. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. Hey, welcome to the trade room, y'all. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. It's a macro Saturday. Welcome to the trade. This is about to be fun. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. It's a macro Saturday. It's a macro Saturday. We got things to talk about. It's a macro Saturday. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. It's a macro Saturday. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. Listen, like, subscribe, put your alerts on. I'm happy to see y'all here today. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. It's a macro Saturday. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. Hey, welcome to the trade room, y'all. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. It's a macro Saturday. Welcome to the trade room, y'all. We're gonna get started soon, guys. Love you guys for showing up. Make sure to like. Make sure to subscribe. Make sure to share with a friend. It's time to get litties.
What's up? Welcome to the trade room on this macro Sunday. All right. I'm doing these Sunday lives with Sticks. I'm gonna have to come up with another theme song because it's not Saturday, right? It's literally Sunday. So shout out to the chat. Shout out to Skiller. Skiller just hopped from the previous stream to this one. Shout out to Sir Worm, the GOAT, the game master. Okay, the quiet, silent killer in the ecosystem. We just came off of our last stream where we did a makeup session. We did a makeup session of yesterday's mishap stream. All right. And that was story time Ripple versus SEC part 2. If you haven't seen that, make sure that when we finish this, go check it out because it is important to tell the story before we hop into things. We're preparing for Sticks to get in. Sticks, take your time. I should see you here, on the private side But take your time. We're gonna, just encapsulate a little bit of what we are preparing for today. Okay, we have some questions for Sticks intern, and we're gonna ask him that as he prepares to come in. So we covered that. Okay, now that was for me. That was from my end. With kind of my perspective, right? We're not getting into all that with Sticks intern. Okay, we are getting into what's the general broad understanding that we need to have with this blockchain realm? Because now we have this industry, but we're coming into a space where the US courts and governments have been here, US regulators and legislators have been here, and they're seeing what's going on in the space, and it scares some of them. And some of them are those incumbents, right? We covered last week in the Repo versus SEC Part 2, incumbents and disruptors. The blockchain space, we're disruptors, and we're coming into these incumbents, and they ain't gonna go down. I mean, we coming in like, hey, we're just trying to solve problems, we're trying to work with people, but they ain't trying to go down, right? So, what are the things that we need to be aware of? And it's just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful to have someone like Sticks intern in this space to give us some sort of guidance as to what's happening in these court cases, what's happening in these litigations, and what should we be looking forward to coming forward. Very, very relevant that the Bitcoin ETF just launched after the SEC did it reluctantly, right? Launched it reluctantly. And we're just coming in here and looking to have some, some discourse and back and forth, a little bit of a intellectual, honest conversation. We have Skiller in the chat saying you should collab with DJ Bloater Sticks intern. Honestly, for the new theme song, because we got to get this thing going. I actually thought about getting with Sticks intern on when I was first thinking about this, because I think like Affinity Lola said, hey, uh, Sticks is a DJ, man. Sticks put some jams down together for other people in the space. And so, me and Sticks kind of chatted back and forth on Twitter. And then I was like, man, this guy's doing so much. Let me try to figure this out, right? Let me not put too much on this man's plate. And funny enough, as somebody who was in tune with music, he loved the intro, right? So maybe we're getting together to up the quality of the intro, as we think about the trading room expanding to other days and not just macro Saturdays. And yeah, it was the ALP track, and that's what made me like, yo, okay, let me get something going on here with that. So look, without further ado, we're gonna bring Sticks intern right into uh, this chat with us here. Sticks, welcome in. This is the first time on my channel. This is I've been really itching to get this going, and I think when I reached out to you, or even just I don't know who reached out first. I think it was like months ago, and we were like, look, let's not rush things. Let's, we'll figure something out. And then it just came to me of let's lean on each other's strengths. Let's continue to build as a community, and let's find out more what's happening in our ecosystem outside of price action and the gaming in space, and how gaming is going to take over, and what's happening in the courts, right? So Sticks, how are you doing? Welcome in. Talk to us.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. And just to clear it up for everyone, yeah, I think it was you that reached out to me, and personally, just on my own, separately, I've been like wanting to think of like how I could set up something where I have someone who's interested and generates their own questions, and it isn't something where like I'm just spoon feeding legal information to an unwilling audience. And you came along with just this perfect idea and like the perfect person, because you are actually interested in like legal questions and issues. It comes through and just the way you talk about the macro markets, baby. But I was so excited when you brought this idea up, and I'm really excited to get this show kicked off. And as far as the intro music goes, and I'm talking to the chat really quick. I do owe Sir Worm. That is the next song that I'm working on, actually. But that said, I would love to remix your intro, because Welcome to the Trade Room, every single time that song's playing, I'm like boogieing.
Yeah, no, I mean that was the concept behind it, is that we're here to have fun. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have a lot going on. I mean, we're literally in a space that is in a constant battle with the government, right? Like, there's some serious stuff going on. But when you bring gaming into the aspect, it is all about having fun. It is all about building. So I was ecstatic to see that you were a fan of that. We'll get to that. We'll get to the remix. We're gonna drop some hot stuff.
Yeah.
On the DFK community here.
And
So
before too far into the start, let me just drop a hot disclaimer here. So since I am going to be talking about legal education, I will give you all my real name. My name is Zachary Golda. I'm licensed to practice in the state of California. I'm not licensed to practice in the other 49 states. So if any of you want legal advice, and if any of you are ever in a situation where civil procedure is what you need legal advice on, I hope you already have an attorney. But if you don't have an attorney, don't take anything I'm saying here as legal advice or as a reflection of the opinions of my firm or my other employer, Mythic Squad. Shout out. Thank you.
Yeah, no,
had to get that way.
no, for sure. Listen, if you need an attorney in the space, listen, we have one here now. A lot of times people are looking for someone and they're like, where do I start? Google, right? So if you're in this community, and you're looking for someone, Styx is the one to go to. Thanks for that disclaimer. I was actually gonna give you the opportunity to do that, but yes, guys, disclaimer. Just like how the SEC comes out and says, "Hey, everything we say here is not our opinion, but we're over here wearing an SEC suit," right? Styx is a little bit more honest with his trade than the SEC. So you gave us a little bit of intro. You doxed yourself, which,
well, yeah,
I mean,
it's kind of like a good move for me if I'm going to be talking about the law generally, just for my own liability.
Yeah.
And that said, no one could ever dox me harder than the state of California already does. They publish all of my personal information online. So, like, I'm already a target for hackers and all that stuff. My firm gets an apparently inbound of over 1,000 phishing attempts a day.
Ooh. Wow.
Yeah, so
Wow.
our cybersecurity team is all up on it. I'm not too worried about you guys getting into my work stuff, honestly, because I do follow what my cybersecurity team tells me to do. So that's like the risk of doxing, right? Someone's going to come get your information. Like, if someone SIM swapped me, they couldn't get my work stuff. That's just a fact. So
yeah, sure, no, that's awesome.
It's going to happen one day, but yeah, I got to give out my real name if I'm going to be talking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's, even the DFK team, right, were started at a certain place and they were like, yeah, okay, well, if we're going to be legitimate, especially with all this nonsense going around, let's dox ourselves. And once they dox themselves, I only got more respect for them, because I'm like, yo, these are some highly intelligent individuals that have come from a background that demands, that, hey, we know what we're talking about, right? So, for me, I have an alias here, but I don't care. Even through my emails, you guys see my name. But I'm also in the technology space, right? So some of the bullishness and the confidence that I've gotten in this space is from getting in the technology space. And with cybersecurity, I mean, even seeing the team, get their X handle taken. Yes, as this space grows, yes, this nascent technology is awesome, but you're also gonna have the scammers come and follow this space. I mean, even on YouTube, when you're trying to watch a regular video, and all next thing you hear, "I'm Michael Saylor, and I want you to send 2 Bitcoin to me," right? And so it's important that we talk macro. It's important that we talk what's happening in these court cases. It's important that we give some credence to the fact that some of these regulators and these legislators that come out and say crypto is full of scams, yes, that portion of it is legitimate to a certain extent. There's a lot of crap happening in this space, but when you try to take that aspect of scamming that happens in every industry, and then you try to take that as an incumbent and try to kill the space with that, that's where I have an issue, right? That's where I have an issue. And so, we're going to get right down into it. But before we do, right, for you, for what you do as a profession, it's a pretty serious and respectable profession. What the hell made you get into this crypto space, and even more specifically, DeFi Kingdoms?
Yeah. So, I mean, as far as why I got into crypto and DeFi Kingdoms, it ties into work a little bit, actually, but mostly it's a personal interest. So I was a political science major. I graduated college in 2013. So shortly after Bitcoin was initially launched in 09, right? Basically launched when I started college. And by the time of my junior year in my class on the financial regulatory schemes, or some similarly boring name like that, Bitcoin came up because I had a pretty young professor. And we were talking about what is money, right? That was kind of part of that class. A lot of the crypto fundamentals that people learn when they first get into crypto, like what is money? It's just this system backed by the state. It used to be backed by this gold standard. It covered all of that history in the class. And so when I was learning about Bitcoin, I was like, wow, this is an amazing kind of technology, right? It's a stateless money that is also, it has a settlement assurance, right? And in real life, settlement assurance is, on the dollar bill, when it says fully backed by the United States government, settlement assurance is the government's. And in many respects, it's the court systems, right? Because who's your settlement assurance when another party doesn't follow through on a contract? We got to go to a court, right? And so it's that legal framework, all encapsulated though into a single programmable network. And that is amazing. And so my first thought when I heard about Bitcoin in 2013 was, government's never going to let something like that take off. So I didn't buy any of it at all. Should have. Biggest mistake of my life. Because if I had done that, just like with the money I had at my first starting job in software sales out of college, instead of going to law school, I'd probably be more wealthy in dollar terms now. Maybe not experience terms, but dollar terms, certainly. Then fast forward many years, I spent 3 years working in sales. And then my wife was, getting close to done with law school. And I was like, you know what? I want to do what you're doing. That looks way more fun than what I'm doing. So I blacked out my life for 3 years, from 2016 to 2019, just only textbooks the entire time. I had no idea any current events at all that entire time. And when I come out, all of a sudden the Bitcoin is more than just what it was when I learned about it in 2013. It's there's a whole ecosystem, all these crypto apps that have now developed around chains like Ethereum and all these other ones, XRP, Avalanche, everything that had just grown up in that time. And I started to get more interested in it. Then I started working at my law firm, right? And one of the biggest ways for junior associates to kind of get noticed by a partner is to volunteer to write blogs for them. And I noticed we had this industry team for blockchain. And I was like, you know what? Screw it. I could probably find a blockchain article that I can write about. And so I did some Googling, and I found an article, or I found a Bankless episode where they interviewed Commissioner Hester Peirce. That was the very first Bankless episode I listened to, was that one. And just hearing a regulator like Hester Peirce talking about blockchain and the potential it had for the world, that sold me to just that got me over the event horizon of the rabbit hole. And I've been falling down ever since. And as to how I got into DFK, well, I've always been a gamer. Unlike Skiller, I am a gamer and have been forever. I've played probably more years in game time than most people ever will. And for me, one of the very first rugs that I got into in blockchain was this, when I was very first starting off, was Hyrule Swap on Binance Smart Chain. And it had NFT weapons, right? And this little ecosystem, but that was it. None of it was ever functional. And the team rugged, and I lost $500 maybe, something like that in it. And I was like, oh, okay, that was cool. I wonder if I'll ever see anything like that, but better. And then enter DeFi Kingdoms with its summoning mechanics, right? And it's like, oh wow, this is actually a complex system. And you have a team here who's actually willing to build a game, unlike what I had before, where it's just like clearly just financial Ponzi mechanism. So it was the game focused design team, and then also the fact that they were so into DeFi. Like I felt like that was such a rare combination to actually find that that's what stuck me with it. And they haven't disappointed. They've delivered on both the DeFi side and the gaming side since then.
Yeah, no, that's interesting that with what you do in your field, that initial like psychological immediate professional reaction of no, this is not going to go anywhere. Government's going to shut this down. To then hearing someone in government who had a little bit of a different idea, right? She couldn't, as the peers couldn't really get through, but she showed her dissent to some of the tactics that
Right.
were being used to that to then bring you in. And then the thing that happens with crypto is once you get in, you get stuck, right? But then seeing something like DFK and just a lot of the innovation that they were doing, the high yield APRs has something to do with that too. But I was gonna ask you if what you do either gives you more or less confidence on the space, but you broke that down so beautifully as the more you get in, the kind of more you are understanding that this is something that is new, but it's leading to a certain place. And being in the field I am with technology, you being where you are, being in your field, you want to be able to, hedge is not the word, but you want to take all those rules and methods that you have in those, and you want to say, nope, from my profession tells me that this is going to go to crap. But when you can take your profession and do the same analysis and say, oh shit, okay, it fits the mode, it can grow in the space and all the rules and the boundaries that I have. So that's important. And I just panned over to the DeFi Kingdoms map. Just for some nostalgia. And I know you're gonna talk about it later, but Mythic Squad is doing their boar hunt, which is pretty awesome. Very excited to see how that pans out. But also, I'm very excited for the new boar hunts, right? The new boar hunts is BYOP. So once I was already planning before we caught wind of that because we got some signs. But I started picking up some mana veils with my botted account, right? So when I land my moksha runes, when I land my tears, I have to function. I have to let gas still function here. But whenever I can, I scoop me up from the alchemist some mana veils because I want to get as close to a zero cost entry for these hunts, and that makes the loot that much sweeter. How do you feel about the new hunts that's coming up? And if you want to plug the Mythic Squad in now, and we'll plug it in later as well if you want, and then we can wrap up the DFK nostalgia for a bit.
Sure. So how do I feel? I mean, if you're willing, you could put my screen up that I just shared up. It's kind of the same inventory screen. But yeah, I have to say I agree with you. As you see here in the center of the screen, I've got 1.2k health pots.
Oh my!
I've got 1.2k mana pots. I've got over 100 stamina pots, and that feels low to me. I've got here 67,000 tiers. That's not nearly enough to hatch all of the 400 gold eggs that I have when they will eventually come out. So for me, yeah, I'm fully dedicated. I'm fully in on this bring your own potions. I think it's going to hit. I actually think I am under allocated to potions, if anything. That's my opinion. And as to the tournament, the tournament's going to be amazing.
Wow. I think
the tournament's going to be great. And I do think the next Void Hunt with BYOP is going to be awesome. For me, this team has really demonstrated a growing awareness that consumptive utility is a necessary mechanism for the success of like a crypto economic ecosystem, right? You can't have infinite production of items and have those items retain value unless there is a consumptive utility, some way to destroy those items for an inherent, like an intangible value, right? And so that's what we do with tiers and stones. We're destroying those items for the potential that they will, like those stat level ups, those little bonuses will matter. They might not, right? And we might have to do it again, but it's consumptive utility for a intangible value that is really driving this. Now, what do we have here with the bring your own potions? We have the potions are going to get directly consumed in the game. So, right, that's one layer of consumptive utility. you need to consume the other items that you farm to make those potions. So we're adding 2 layers of consumptive utility. And although the second one, the items for the potion, that's like a very direct, tangible benefit, right? I know that I will get 1 potion if I burn these items. I don't know if I'm going to get a win if I use the potions in game, right? That's more of that intangible, speculative kind of soft value. And I think consumptive utility for that soft, hard to value kind of concept, that intangible value, is what's really going to light the engine up on this game, just like we saw Dark Summoning do for the pit.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think the intangible value is important, and intrinsic value is important as well. Bitcoin has intrinsic value aside from some of the other things that it has. So awesome, appreciate that feedback from there. And you're in thick. I mean, I thought I was under allocated. You're 1,000 up in your potions, and you still feel under allocated. I mean,
So
geez.
I worry only
you also do hunts at an astronomical clip.
True. Yeah, I spend over 1,000 a crystal a day on hunts.
Yeah, go ahead.
Over 100, sorry. Over 10? Yeah. I don't know. Over 1,000 a week is probably a fair assessment on crystal.
Oh, okay. I mean, not bad, but that's the same consumptive, generation that you're speaking of there. Yeah. So yeah, that wraps up the DFK end of things. Have a few more questions for you. We still have a lot to get through, but on my end, with the Macro Saturdays, personally covering a bit of the SEC versus Ripple. That's only one of the many litigation cases that are going on. I mean, it's so fast that it can be so vast that people are just like, oh, well, it's too much to think of. So on my channel, on the Macro Saturdays, I'm going through one specific litigation case, the context and some of the history behind that. Still doing the part 3 and a part 4, so we're not gonna jump too heavily into it, because some of the next times that I have you on, I feel like you'll be able to, give your feedback on some of these opinions, because they are opinions that I have, but also too on some of these facts that I have and that I drop here. But going through that, we spoke the first week about incumbents and disruptors. And we're going to get into a bit of that conversation. And then this following week, part 2, we spoke about the history of crypto. Cool. Right? The history of crypto, and not just the history, but the timely concept behind it. And when you are a new blockchain network that is launching, how tough it is to survive, right? I wanted to give people that context, because with Ethereum launching, let me just make sure I have the right time here. With Ethereum launching in 2015, these were the top 10, all right? These were the head honchos, okay? It was between Bitcoin, XRP, and Litecoin. And Ethereum, when it first launched, was, if my eyes don't deceive me here, 38, with under $1 million market cap, with the first million Ethereum tokens launched. And when you are in the space, you're either going to die or you're going to find some way to get adoption, right? And so what we spoke about was, how did Ethereum get to where it is today? And from my perspective, we cannot ignore 3 things, okay? But one thing more specifically. From my perspective, 1, the technology is great and amazing. All right, the technology is great and amazing. Vitalik Buterin, when he was young and in his search of coming up with something in the blockchain space that would have great usage, first of all, he's a great mind, and he also slept in the couch of a couple of the developers that on an XRP blockchain, and with some Ripple folks. Speaking about smart contracts, which Ripple on their end was trying to develop Codius, which was a smart contract platform, but they decided, okay, you know what? Let's just do what Amazon did. Let's just go prove one thing works. Let's go attack payments, and then we can branch out from there. But all this time where Vitalik strategically spent going around and learning the best of blockchains, he then said, I'm a risk taker. I'm a technology guy. Let's put it forward. That's one thing that has made Ethereum what it is. The second thing that has made Ethereum what it is the ICO aspect of things, right? Ethereum got launched and it was an ICO, point blank period,
Yep.
which is a security.
Oh
Okay, because
yeah.
the ICO is directly in correlation to an IPO in the stock market. It is a security. So that's the second thing is not only was Ethereum an ICO launch, but once Ethereum launched, and I believe I'm not gonna say names. I believe it was detailed as utility token launches, there was an onslaught of ICOs, and about 70% of them, 75% of them were launched on the Ethereum blockchain, which did what? Which also drove the market cap up. Because even though these were ICOs and these were illegal security sales, some of them flourished. And the ones that died only put more money in venture capitalist pockets, right? So those are the two things: the ICO launch, the technology, which is amazing, and thirdly, shaky regulatory clarity from the SEC. Now, in my opinion, Ethereum price still ran greatly, but what happened between 2015 when they launched and 2018 when they launched is where some of the law firms really fought, right? If I have something, I'm gonna fight for it. I'm gonna do everything I can for it, especially if I have a under $1 million market cap and I could die. I'm gonna have my lawyers go talk to the SEC, go do this, go do that. And then all of a sudden, in 2018, 3 years after the token was launched, all of a sudden, forget the ICO. Despite the ICO, these guys are decentralized. A framework that was drafted by representations of people who were interested in a specific blockchain network, and all of a sudden, decentralization was created. So, that leads us to just the question of, hey, why does the SEC then 3 years later charge a blockchain network that did not do an ICO, that also did not advocate disguised whales and things of that nature? So, with all that being said, we covered that last week. More importantly, incumbents and disruptors is the overall conversation. And what we're going to ask you, we have a question for you. Do I believe that Ethereum is still an indicator of all season? 1,000,000,000%. 1,000,000,000%. Because price action is price action. It's already been adopted in a way. It's going to carry and continue to grow. But we cannot ignore how something came about, right? And the perceived regulatory clarity. And if you know your law firm is working on something, again, not doing any specifics, then the noise is going to be in other law firms, and then developers, venture capitalists, all these guys that are looking to take that risk of selling securities. If the word is going around that we're in with the SEC, you're going to be you're going to be more prone to say, fuck it, F it, let's do it. Let's go ahead and launch on this blockchain. So
fuck it, we'll do it live.
Yeah. So the question that we're going to have for you, we have a few for you here, is going to be based on some of the story that we've been covering. But overall, we have a bunch of other court cases to cover. And the overall concept is, what is the impact, right? What is the impact that these cases are going to have on the space moving forward? And if you are ready, we are going to get right into it.
But just one thought that came to mind just before we dive into it is, you said illegal securities transactions, and there was nothing at all wrong with what you said there. But I just want to give some context, because I think a lot of people don't really understand why society gives a shit about securities transactions and why they're so bad, right? And so first off, society loves securities transactions. We love the idea of people pooling money for a business enterprise venture. Society loves that. So securities themselves are not like an evil thing. We actually really like securities. The problem is that in the 20s, in the Great Depression kind of time, we had people out there who were just saying, yeah, I'll go make this great business. Watch, I got the carbolic smoke ball. It's going to be the next big fucking thing. And they'd fundraise all this money, and then they wouldn't actually do anything to start the business. They would just take the money and run, right? And so it's, if you think about contract law is the law of enforceable promises. When will the state use its sovereign power to enforce a promise that you made to another citizen? That's what contracts is. And securities is a very small subset of those enforceable promises, which is the promise to give you a return on your money in exchange for funding the start of my business. Like that specific promise is so important that we have a whole federal agency dedicated to it to regulate nationally. Typically, contract law is a matter of state law. This is like a kind of exception to that general rule. And so just like from that framework, first off, like in a perfect world where the ICO actually kind of follows through on its promises, like the fact that they weren't registered is does make it illegal, but it's not like, it's still not the bad. It's still not.
So really quickly, not sure if Sticks got paused there. Okay,
Oh, weird.
I think we have him back. I think we have him back.
Where did I cut off? Yeah, I saw my camera stop.
Yeah, only about 6 seconds. Only about
Okay,
6 seconds.
Yeah. Just I was just saying, like it's the failure to register that's the bad things. We want like people to have to give up certain information about what they're doing, and like who can be sued if they fail to follow through. They need to file that, and that's the biggest part of what makes an illegal securities transaction illegal, is that they didn't register.
Yes, and those regulations and overhead watches were meant to protect investors, right? And investors should be happy about that setup, right? SEC. Well, listen, if I'm in an ecosystem, right? If I'm in the US, I want to make sure that if the US gets threatened, that the military is going to respond.
Yes.
Right. And so, okay, if you are a government entity and you care about your people, and I believe the US has come the closest to showing any signs of that. If you want to protect me from losing my money, if this is the system that you have set up, and if I trust you, I'm all trusting, I'm like, okay, cool, I'm down for that. Right. But within those sort of concepts and those systems, you then put human beings
Right.
as the overseers of those concepts and those systems. And
Well,
we
right.
know.
Really quickly, if we think about securities laws, the basic idea is register, give out this information, and then anyone who buys, you know what you're getting into, right? And I don't really care if you got harmed, you knew what you were getting into. Like that's the way it works. Well, the evolution of that same kind of argument, you knew what you were getting into. That's why we have accredited investor rules where, you have to make a certain amount of money or have a certain degree in order to buy stocks at all. And it's like, so you get from this good reasoning a very bad result where like now most of the workforce is cut off from investing and like making money. And that's why the rich are getting richer, because they can actually invest in these things that have high upside. The poor can't by law.
Exactly. The whole accredited investor thing is a bunch of hogwash. All right. Did I want to buy Coinbase before they IPO'd because I was already in crypto and I understood what kind of custodian they were? Are you only going to let Snoop Dogg and Nas buy it? For what reason? They're effing rappers. Okay. What's the difference between them and myself? What is the difference between Snoop Dogg and me? Okay. Absolutely nothing. What did they prove to these credit investors? Have millions of dollars. So, I am a fan of capitalism, and that sort of thing kind of goes against it. But it's all in the name of protecting investors. And again, you see, even though I'm telling the story and I'm a little bit upset about I still am respectful of authoritative figures if it's in the good of the people and you're protecting us as a whole. But what's been happening has been absolutely ridiculous, right? And so thank you for that context of securities. Thank you for the context of how that works. And so, one of the questions I have from you is, what do you think of the current regulatory environment in crypto? You know, Gary Gensler loves to say the rules of the road, right? You know, we don't know the rules. I'm here to deliver the rules of the road, but what some of these blockchains like to say is we don't know the rules of the road, right? And so we recently had a Bitcoin ETF that was passed, kind of looking very reluctantly, passed reluctantly from the SEC. So, what are your thoughts on the current regulatory environment in context of, you know, securities and the how we test? And what do you see of the current regulatory environment? Because we already know how I feel about it, right? We've been covering for the last 2 weeks. I think it's a hot mess. Are the rules of the road clear, like the SEC says? And how do we take that context with now the approval of the Bitcoin ETF that's been approved reluctantly?
Yeah. So I think the rules of the road as they exist right now are very clear for traditional systems, where if I have a identifiable group of people who are making a purchase, I can list them all out, deliver that to the SEC, show them that I have an exempt transaction, right? Is there exempt securities transactions? Like if it's not big enough for the SEC to care about, they'll just let you do it. But you have to like tell them first. And so it works very well. Like the idea is come in and register. That's where it falls apart. It's very clear that we should all come in and register. Done. Easy. Obvious. What's not clear is how an issuer of a token is supposed to register, because there are information gaps where like I literally can't complete the form that you have here because I don't know and cannot possibly know X, Y, and Z. And also your form doesn't include A, B, and C that are important over here in crypto, but are not necessarily important in the traditional finance space. So how do I come in and register? And the SEC is like, yeah, just do it. You got it. Come on in. Gary Gensler, come in and register. Our door's always open. If you want a Wells notice, just come on in, right? And for those of you unaware, a Wells notice is a letter that the SEC sends to companies as like a pre-lawsuit threat. Like, hey,
we're gonna sue you.
You can stop. Yeah, we're going to sue you unless you stop voluntarily. That's what a Wells notice is. So when I say come in and register, you can get one of those. That's basically what their invitation is to the crypto industry as a whole. Just because the registration requirements are built for a system that is not crypto. And so until they can put together some rules that actually explain how to register, well, it can be as clear as the fact that the sun comes up every day to that people need to come in and register, but also unclear as the murk in a swamp of a bog side, if you will. And it could be that unclear as to how to actually do it. And so, yes, the law is clear in one sense, at the most general level. It is unclear at the detailed, specific level of like, give me a form to fill out. That's basically what the crypto industry has been saying for several years now. Give us a form, and they won't do it. And so
a form or a process.
Right. Yeah.
Or a process. Right. And that actually goes to one of the things that I like to focus on in this storytelling realm that we're going in. And we're going to come back and have you I'll give my thought process on regulators and comments disruptors, because it speaks to exactly what you're speaking of. You know, my whole thing was, and I'm trying to not lose my I'm trying to not lose my shit. Oh, so when Bill Hinman drops his decentralization, a speech where, again, when Howie met Gary, he titled his thing When Howie Met Gary. So he's coming in directly correlating this speech to securities.
Right.
He isolates Ethereum. Why not come in like this handsome professional lawyer here just detailed to us and say, well, we want to set the rules of the road. And even if the rules of the road are already clear, in our opinion, these are the spaces and how you need to fit in, because there are 2,000 of you guys, right? As an SEC individual, government entity, you have to fit this space to come in, because we're titling the speech When Howie Met Gary to send a market notice that this is in correlation to how we think about the market and the space. why isolate Ethereum specifically, and why not speak like you speak, a professional that has some sort of common sense and says, well, I have to be a little bit ambiguatory, and I want the space to understand that you have to meet these metrics. And so with that in context, my opinion is there's a battle of incumbents and disruptors happening. When the incumbents realized, okay, well, we can fight it. Okay, well, now we have to try to accept this space in some way. Now the incumbents are saying, well, we're going to pick the winners because we might want to build our own thing, CBDCs. But what if this space just continues to grow as it is? We want to pick the winners. And so now that we're picking the winners, we have connection to the SEC regulator. Incumbents and disruptors all have to make decisions. A disruptor made a decision to launch ICOs, come up with a decentralization mechanism, and push that till and never die from pushing that. And we were able to communicate with the regulator, and the regulator believes this decentralization concept that we've made up and put out with our lawyers. And so my opinion is that you have incumbents realizing, okay, we can't stop this thing. And it happens when new asset classes coming in. And a regulator that is specifically looking to push something. What do you think of? Obviously, we told us what you think of the current regulatory space, but what do you think of the history of regulators, incumbents, disruptors, what we're seeing in the crypto space, and what we have seen in history in other asset classes? And give us some context. Am I crazy here, or what's happening?
You're absolutely not crazy. And I think your read of this is like totally fair as an incumbent. Like kind of, hey, we'll pick these two, Bitcoin, Ethereum. They have this magical property called decentralization that, like, yeah, we can't define it, but we'll figure it out eventually. And everything else that ICOs, that's illegal as shit, right? That's basically what this letter says. If you want my take as a practicing attorney, I think this is a big giant CYA email. And CYA emails are what I call cover your ass emails. That's kind of thing where I say to my client, hey, if we do this, the thing you want to do, we're definitely going to lose. And I have to put that in writing to my client and tell them, like, hey, even though I know you want to do this, it is my legal advice to you as an attorney that we're going to lose if we do this. But I am your attorney. I have to do what you want at the end of the day. So if you want to do that, cool. It's so that I, on the back end, when we do lose, the client doesn't say, hey, my attorney should have told me this. Malpractice, right? And so that's why it's a cover your ass email.
So who's covering their ass?
The SEC, Hinman. 2018, it was too late for them to go after the Ethereum issuers. There's a 2-year statute of limitations for violations of the securities regulations. 2 years for these regulatory bodies to bring a suit.
That was the question.
It was 3 years after Ethereum launched. So to me, this is them saying, hey, ICOs are definitely illegal. We're coming after those now that we have a clue what they are. Now that we've learned what they are, we're coming after those. This Ethereum one, we missed that. And so how do we explain the fact that we missed that, right? Because it's now 2018. We didn't sue them in time. So we're not going to be able to ever. And if we do bring a suit and lose, that looks bad for the agency, right? Because the statute of limitations is like, you're done.
Well, how long is the statute of limitations?
2 years. So they missed it. And so to me, this is them saying, hey, we missed that one. Sorry about it. But going forward, we have now figured out what this is. And we're going to, like, now that we know what it is, we're coming after it. Right. And so, yeah, they literally just missed Ethereum. And I think part of it's that, like, the issuers weren't in America. I don't think, not all of them, a significant amount. And the SEC has very rigid jurisdictional regulations where they could only really kind of go after people who are in America, American citizens, or directly and substantially targeting their efforts at fundraising towards American citizens, right? So if I'm in the Bahamas and I post something on like a website that, sure, like an American can access it, but I don't advertise it anywhere in America. I really only advertise it in South America and other kind of island states. And people from America, like a very small number, happen to buy my security that I'm offering that way. that might not be enough to confer the SEC jurisdiction over it. The fact that some Americans did some research to find this thing, found it, and bought it, you weren't really targeting. You didn't bring yourself within the jurisdiction, the power of the American legal system by doing that. And we have very detailed and complicated rules on personal jurisdiction for the federal courts, like when we can assert power over a non-U.S. citizen. And so I think there were a lot of those issues that tied into it. And what you throw in the statute of limitations, this is a massive amount of work, probably millions in legal, like attorney's fees, just for what's probably going to be a loss. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to issue this press release where we say that ICOs are bad. These two are fine because they're sufficiently decentralized. Don't worry about what that means. It's not going to matter anymore because ICOs are bad and nothing else is ever going to make it to sufficiently decentralized. That's this letter.
Yeah. But you know that's amazing. It's an amazing breakdown because honestly, look, I've probably come across this before in the 3 years of this specific litigation case that I'm following, but some of these additional details are gems because when your hands are tied, what do? You know, I mean, the Ethereum Foundation also specifically chose to come out of Zurich,
right?
You know, to make sure that
was
not an accident at all. That was not an accident at all. So there's some strategic moves being made on the part of the disruptor. And then the SEC kind of seeing what they had in front of them, it had to then, hey, we're going to come after ICOs, but it just, for me, it's just why focus so hard on just Ethereum? That's my thing, right? Why focus so hard on just Ethereum? And then why 3 years later go sue Ripple Labs, the company that is utilizing the XRP ledger? And I will let you go ahead and tap into that. You know, and really we're talking about the Bitcoin ETF and that passing reluctantly from the SEC. We're talking about a couple of these litigation cases that we have going on, Grayscale, which led to the Bitcoin ETF, Ripple that we're looking at now. And then we'll talk about the Coinbase side of things because SEC approved something and we'll talk about that. But why then, if you are an incumbent playing this game, you saw it was too late, why then go after Ripple Labs? And I'll leave the floor to you before I put my opinion in there.
So on the one hand, Ripple Labs was a probably what felt like a safe target because they had the several investor sales, which are a classic security scheme, right? And it wasn't the token that was the security in that. It was the promises, going back to securities law is a subset of contract law, which is the law of enforceable promises, right? So it's not what's written down on the paper. That's not what's important. What matters is the promise that you make. That's what makes a contract, right? And so it was the enforceable or the promises made to the major investors, right? The big players. All of those were found on the summary judgment motion to be securities, right? So I think that aspect of it was seen like an easy W by whoever was running the SEC at the time. I'm not saying accurate. I'm just saying that was probably the perceived mindset.
Now the summary judgment, and let me just come in. The summary judgment was at what timeline within this case?
That was the win. That was the big win because that was the same moment where she decided that the programmatic sales on secondary markets were not securities transactions.
Right.
So
but did she deem those securities, or did she say, hey, this is the only thing that can now move on to trial?
So the only thing that could move on were the aiding and abetting claims as to the individual defendants. So there was a win for the SEC as to the investor sales, like to the big institutional investors. A big loss, much bigger loss for the SEC as to the programmatic sales. Like and the loss is so much bigger than that win that like the whole thing is a loss for the SEC, right? They basically they got their easy layup and they didn't hit the 3-pointer to win the game. Is kind of how I would analogize it. But so like I don't think anyone really expected Ripple, honestly, to win on the investor side on those sales because they were pretty classic. It was like, hey, they had contracts in place with all these people. So I really don't think that was a shock to even like John Deaton. You're probably familiar with him, right? I follow him on the timeline. I don't think that would have surprised even him. But as far as why they would come after XRP, I've heard a theory that I resonated with on I don't remember where, it was a while ago, that Hinman was on his way out. He'd caught flack for this cover your ass letter that we just talked about, when Harry meets or how he meets Gary. And I think he wanted to take a stance where, like, look, I was tough on crime in my time there. And look, I started this lawsuit against these, and people suspect Gary is going to do the same thing. It's actually not an uncommon thing for heads of agencies or like significant directors of agencies on their way out to kind of push through some start of litigation, because you get all the benefits when you're at there, right? When you're looking for your next job, look, I was tough on crime. I started this litigation, all this stuff. 3 years later, you're entrenched at your new job. You're the one doing the hiring. That's when the loss happens, right? So it's kind of like a personal, it's a bad effect of our system of governments being reliant on humans, is that you can manipulate the system in those small ways. And so that's one theory I've heard that I liked. I'm not saying that it's necessarily true. And then I honestly, I don't know why. Is Ripple proof of work, right? Or is it proof of stake? That's one thing.
No, it's a totally different consensus mechanism.
It's a totally different consensus mechanism.
It's a totally different. The consensus mechanism is what makes it what it is. Whereas it literally looks for any currency in any destination for the lowest liquidity pair, and it's a consensus algorithm. It's totally different for proof of work or proof of stake.
Yeah. Okay. So that negates the other theory that I had. I was thinking maybe he was trying to like find a way to go after proof of stake, right, before it came to Ethereum. But I guess that was just me misunderstanding the situation. So ignore that part. But I do resonate still with the trying to look tough, and the fact that the sales to institutional investors seemed like an easy W at the time. Is probably why, like, but as far as why single out Ripple, it isn't uncommon for regulators to meet with industry professionals. And so just one aspect of the administrative state we live in is that we have legislators, right? They are the people who write the laws. That is Nancy Pelosi. That is, pick your favorite congressman, Bill Hinman, whatever. No, not Bill Hinman. The guy who's always mean to Gary whenever he comes and talks to the House. Who I'm trying to remember. I'm totally blanking on his name. Tom Emmer. There we go.
Tom Emmer, yeah.
So those people are legislators, right? They write the rules. And they also delegate authority to agencies, which are a part of the executive branch. And agencies like the SEC are regulators, right? So they have these rules that are written by legislators that they then have to go make like specifics for. So the legislators will be like, all sales of securities transactions must comply with the SEC's regulations for them. And then boom, the SEC goes and makes the regulations for what, like, here's the forms you have to fill out. Here's when they have to be filed, right? You don't want really a legislator making that detailed of stuff, right? Because then it becomes codified and it's impossible to change ever. So it's better to have a regulator do that kind of detailed work where it's like, last year we noticed 6 months wasn't enough time. This year we'll make it 7. Right, that kind of thing. But that's really all it's supposed to be. They're supposed to administrate the law. They're not supposed to be really out there making new laws. The issue in American society that, like, when people who harp on the administrative state, what they're talking about is the fact that Congress has become such a deadlocked, lazy agency or a body that they can only pass very vague laws, and the regulators who get them end up having to actually make a bunch of rules, like take the legislator's job of actually making the rules of prohibiting conduct, right? Instead of just administering the rules. And so that's the problem we have in the administrative state today. But that said, in the classic idea of it, the regulator was supposed to be like an approachable part of the government for industry experts to come in and say, hey, you're regulating our specific industry. We've grouped together to talk to you here. And, here's where you're messing up. Here's where you're doing well. Hey, some of us, some subgroup says, no, they're wrong. You should do it this way. Some other subgroup says, no, you're wrong. You should do it this way. And you gather all of these information from the public, right? It gives it legitimacy. And you take that and use it to inform the rules, because ultimately we want the rules to, like, to the best extent possible, reflect a reasonable business reality and not too heavily change the reasonable business reality, because the business is working pretty good generally, right? And so lots of the law of contracts, when the UCC was developed, like to kind of formalize it for the United States, was, hey, we don't want to change how people are doing stuff. We just kind of want to write down how people are actually doing stuff, right? And so that's when the administrative state is working as intended. It's people are meeting with, the regulators are meeting with these industry professionals and are taking their words and advice under advisement. Where that system gets corrupted is when those meetings start happening in private, because the whole idea is it should be in public so that everyone else in the industry can also respond to whatever that one industry actor is saying. Like, no, that guy is full of shit. We all think so, right? Or that kind of stuff. When it starts happening in private, that's where you start getting corruption.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. When it starts happening in private, that's where you start getting corruption. Because does Gary Gensler have to detail whatever he spoke to about anybody with Sam Bankman-Fried or any of these people? No. Does he have to put that out there? Not at all. You know, the former head of the SEC, do they have to put out there? No. So those conversations were actually meant to get some feedback from the industry leaders, so the SEC can make sure to not only understand the industry more, but be able to lay out the rules of the road. And what the SEC ended up doing is what? Using those meetings to then capture the info and everything that was happening in that space, to then figure out how exactly we need to sue you to bring you down. And so Ripple was going in there and having open-ended conversations. Ripple was going in there and saying, hey, we're using this technology. They were actually releasing public earnings, literally doing it every 3 months, because they're like, hey, this is what we know that is the right thing to practice. This is what the regulator is supposed to do. And we are showing that we are not hiding anything. Right. We are showing that we are not hiding anything, and we are going to put out as much info as we can. And the SEC used that in the Ripple case, in the other cases, to then go after these agencies. And that's the thing, right? Like, I'm glad to know that the window is closed, but it doesn't mean that criminal activity didn't happen with specific individuals, right? And so you look at a space like Ripple, XRP, what they're doing with the XRP ledger, and then you look at the space with Ethereum, and you kind of question, is this process that has been put in place by our government, is this process that has been put in place for these regulators to do the right thing, has it been corrupted? And if it's not corrupted, has this open door policy between government and these private entities, and then has it gone too far? Whereas in you can have these incumbents, who we know incumbents run the world. You can have these incumbents be able to protect themselves in ways that are non-constitutional when it comes to their connections in these agencies. And then do people suffer because of this, right? Why do you think 75,000 people decided to sign up and get sued by the SEC? Because we suffered. Do you know how psychologically, mentally tormenting it is to look at a possible investment, know that in crypto, hey, we don't have accredited investor. There's an accredited investor wall when it comes to the equities market, but there's not an accredited investor wall when it comes to the digital asset cryptocurrency space. We are coming in like, oh, we're not about meme coins. We're not trying to make a lot. We just want to grow, whether it's 15 years, 20 years, 30 years. We just want to grow. We want to do the right things. And then to have a regulator drop a regulator that doesn't lose, drop a lawsuit, and you're sitting there mentally butt raped, thinking about what happened. I thought I was not the meme coin boys. I thought I was just following, doing your research and finding the spaces and growing. And so we were hurt. So why do you think 75,000 people said, no way, SEC, holler at us, sue us too? we think you're wrong. And history has only proved that, right? So we're looking at all these specific cases. We're looking at what the regulator is there and is supposed to do. And we're looking at the history of regulators, incumbents, and disruptors. And we're seeing that, you know, shit is not sweet in this world. A lot of examples show us that shit is not sweet in this world, but that for sure showed me that shit is not sweet in this world. And imagine the psychological torment when that happens. You go on YouTube. Hi, I am Brad Garlinghouse, the CEO of Ripple. We are running a special promotion. If you send us half of your XRP, we will send double back. Imagine the psychological torment where you go from that to that, right? And so, how have these regulators, how bad have they hurt people making these sort of moves that are not based on justified reasons that the court is now showing to us, right? The XRP ledger is not some undecentralized, it's actually one of the most decentralized ledgers, the ledger that could provide a lot of liquidity for us, and it allows users to denominate their transactions with any currency they prefer, including fiat currencies, digital currencies, and other forms of value. And XRP, the native asset of the XRP ledger. So, we're talking about instant settlement, real-time settlement, 3 to 6 seconds, and contains a decentralized exchange. It contains a DEX. It was one of the first DEXs ever launched. We're talking about the third blockchain network launched after Bitcoin. Put some respect on our name, where payments automatically use the cheapest currency trade orders available to bridge currencies. We're talking Japanese yen. We're talking every single gold. We're talking every single possible currency. It automatically is able to scope the entire world and find your cheapest pair to get your transaction done across an efficient way. So why come after this specific blockchain? It's because it is not connected to the incumbents. It's because it is open source decentralized blockchain. And if we can stomp this down, we know BlackRock is going to have Bitcoin ETF launch. We know BlackRock is going to have that connection to Bitcoin. We know that JP Morgan is going to have the connection to Ethereum. No one has connection to the XRP ledger other than one a fintech company that gives fintech solutions to the whatever company wants to use them, and then maybe 15 other developers, entities. It's like Santander, who's a bank who's using that.
Yeah,
we don't have control of this. We gotta do something about this, guys. It's number 3, and it's not going down, right? So that's a part of the overall thesis. That's my feelings on regulators, incumbents, and disruptors, knowing the history of that. I feel bad for Elon Musk. He went through the same thing when it comes to electrical vehicles. But this is what happens, right? And this is the space that we're in. And so, any closing comments on that before we look at the last case, which is Coinbase versus the SEC?
I do have some comments because, look, I can tell you directly the harm that a lawsuit like this does. Is when I first was going down that crypto rabbit hole we talked about earlier today, my sensei, my friend's roommate, who was teaching me everything about crypto, I was like, hey, what's this XRP thing? What's that? And he was like, oh, it's a known scam. Right? It's not. The more I've learned about it, it's not one. But it gives that stigma to what is an otherwise legitimate project. And yeah, I think I agree with you. Even just abstracting it a little more generally, right? Just anything that threatens the financial system threatens the state, because the financial system is how the United States conducts the most widespread warrantless surveillance regime that has ever existed on this planet. And it is done because every single financial institution, every bank officer at teller that you go and talk to who's cute, they are all deputized members of the state, and they are regularly have federal regulators go shove microscopes up the ass of the bank and look at everything and make sure that they are correctly collecting all of the data about you that the state wants. And so any payment system, any disintermediated payment system is a massive threat to the nation state as it exists today, because the nation state as it exists today is wholly reliant on a massive, unfathomably large, and unfathomably accurate surveillance regime. So I agree with you on that wholeheartedly. And then as a side note, I think Bitcoin was always bound to become captured by centralized custodians because you can't do anything with it. You can only send it back and forth. You know what's really good for that? A bank. Like, so I can do stuff with it, get some interest, you know. But that's the total side note. But yeah, I do think you're spot on with the reason why they're coming after XRP and like like not even decentralized, just a disintermediated payment system is a huge threat to the state.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think that, hey, incumbents are going to fight, right? So when you're fighting, you have to attack from multiple ends. And that leads us to the Coinbase end of things, right? You attack a blockchain, you find a way to do regulatory capture on the top 2, 3, and then you attack a liquidity source, right? You attack a custodian source, especially if you're getting ready to have your people be custodians, right?
Right.
So Coinbase is not a BlackRock, Coinbase is not a Fidelity.
But side note, Coinbase is the registered custodian for all of like the leading.
Bingo. And what happened with that? What happened with that? The incumbents, knowing they wanted to get in, knowing it's been 13, 14 years, knowing the regulatory capture or the regulatory stomping of a nascent grassroots participant may not work out. Yeah, they're going to shoot their shot. They're going to sue Coinbase. But hey, just in case it doesn't work out, BlackRock, all you guys, use them as and the SEC was not going to. It's so funny. The SEC was not going to approve the BlackRock ETF application if they did not go with somebody like Coinbase, right? And so, I have a lot of respect for Coinbase, but can you give us some perspective on, again, we're talking about regulators, incumbents, and disruptors, your opinion of the SEC versus the Coinbase, what they're trying to get at, and how Coinbase is structuring their fight, or just your overall opinion about this three-pronged attack from this side and why go after Coinbase?
Right. So I think on this one, it's much easier for me to understand why they're going after Coinbase because I've been up to date with like the specific people who are in charge of the SEC right now when the decision to go after them and like their motivations was made, whereas like Ripple was a while ago when that case started. So the reason I think that they're going after Coinbase really is to establish a few things. One, they really want to attack proof of stake. There are a number of proof of stake coins that are alleged to be securities in the case. Now, I think the SEC believes itself to be very crafty and witty and like, hey, if we can get precedent out there saying that these tokens are securities, it doesn't really matter if the people who issued those tokens, the issuers, weren't parties, right? Because if I can get a court to say it against Coinbase, then I can just take that precedent and I can use it. I can throw it in a Wells notice to every single token issuer on the planet, and they're good. I'm good, right? So that's one aspect, I think. Personally, I know that the court in the motion to dismiss hearing on Coinbase specifically raised that issue with the SEC and is wise to the fact that they are doing that. Like, hey, isn't there a problem that none of these issuers are here? And if I were to rule in your favor, wouldn't you just take that ruling and go throw it against all of the issuers out there? I have to think about more than just the facts of the case before me. I have to think about how you, the regulator, are going to use this opinion. And so that was very pointed. You normally don't get a court being that pointed about it. The fact that like there's this strategic thing and I see what you're doing and I don't like it is kind of the vibe that I got from the questioning. So I do think that's one aspect of the case. Another reason why I think they're coming after proof of stake hard is because they're trying to get rid of Coinbase's staking program, which I actually think is odd because if I'm the state and I have this like decentralized, right, however much weight you want to ascribe that word personally, like audience, if I have this decentralized staking network, isn't it way easier for me to exert control over it if I let them all stake with Coinbase, who has KYC and I can get all that surveillance data that I'm used to. And I know actually who's running the network now. It's Coinbase, an SEC regulated entity. That's great. So I don't get why they're going so hard at staking. And to justify that in my mind, I have to tie it back to that proof of stake mindset, in that they just want to kill the entire thing. And I think they, to some extent, the powers that be believe that they have a great argument against proof of work systems, in that they're environmentally unfriendly. And now if they can just find a way to murder proof of stake, the entire industry will be dead, right? That's kind of what I think their mindset is in going after those two. And then I think the real thing that tells you that it's obvious they want to destroy the whole industry is the fact that they tried to bring in the Coinbase wallet as a security service, when that's literally just a reskin of MetaMask, right? With Coinbase's branding. And it's a wallet app. If providing that service in some way makes you a regulated entity subject to SEC controls, America might as well just kick crypto out, because no one's going to want to do it here, because that is such a huge threat. If literally just making a wallet counts, what doesn't count? Everything counts. But again, I do think on the questioning, the court the other day was very clear with both parties that, all right, so wait, I can rule in the SEC's favor on some things and your favor on other things, Coinbase's favor on other things. And that wanting to split it up is a very big deal at this phase of the case. Because let me give you my analogy for litigation. Litigation is like a 3-phase board game. The first phase of the board game, the plaintiff comes to the court and says, hey, here's the game I want to play. And that's filing the complaint. And the game is either breach of contract or securities violations, right? And so the plaintiff comes, they say what game they want to play, and they put their pieces on the table. And that's filing the complaint. And the defendant, in this first phase, the pleadings phase, can file a motion to dismiss, which is, hey, Your Honor, they said that they want to play this game, but they didn't put all the pieces on the board that they need to play this game. So they can't possibly win. So you should just decide in my favor now. Right? That's what a motion to dismiss is. They don't have enough pieces on their board to play this game. And it's hard to win, because generally it's pretty easy. I just need to say, I could sue Trade Room. All I have to say is, we had a contract, you breached it, I was hard, add a little factual details. I could sue you even if I made all that up. Now, I could be punished in other ways for having made all that up. But as far as my complaint would be sound, And so it's super easy to get a sound complaint. So it's hard to win a motion to dismiss, which is what Coinbase is trying to do.
Right.
And so the fact that the court was specifically saying, hey, can I rule in your favor on this, even if I rule against you on this? That tells me that the court is thinking, I want to get rid of some of these claims, because to me, they are just totally meritless. There's not enough pieces on the board.
It felt like the court was pretty friendly to Coinbase.
It certainly. The questions that she was asking to the SEC felt to me like she was trying to give them an opportunity to convince her of something, right? To change her mind. And I felt like she was asking softballs to Coinbase, where if I ask you this question, right? All right, I'm good on that. Yeah, okay, good. And if I do that, I'm good. Okay, yeah. It was it's hard to kind of give people a sense of oral argument questions without having just listened to a bunch of them. But you can kind of tell when the judge is softballing questions, because it's oh, that's a question that every lawyer should have been able to predict would have been coming and prepared an answer for. That's very persuasive. Whereas the hardball questions are oh, wow, you actually thought a lot about this, Your Honor. And that's what she was kind of getting to the SEC with, where they kind of have to think on their feet on the fly. And they messed up a bunch of times, in my opinion, with their on the fly responses. So personally, I think based on what I heard at the hearing, that the wallet claim is the most likely to get kicked. And if any one of the claims gets kicked, the SEC has to then file a new complaint, a first amended complaint. And guess what? We're right back where we started. Coinbase has the option to look at that first amended complaint and say, hey, there's still not enough pieces on the board. And as a matter of procedure, typically the courts will allow plaintiffs liberal amendment, which means, give them a chance to amend their complaint. Sure, they left out some facts. They can put them in on the next one. They're good to go. But if they start doing it 3 or 4 times, it starts to get to the point where the court's nah, no more chances. Right. So right now we're at the first time. Definitely going to give them another chance if there is a grant of any part of the motion to dismiss. I do suspect that some part of it is going to go forward. And go forward, what's that mean? That means we moved from phase 1 of the litigation board game to phase 2. And you've been a defendant in a case. You signed up for that Ripple case. Power to you. That phase 2 is the long, slog, boring part called discovery. And that's where the parties are exchanging documents with each other, fighting over the wording.
Discovery is fun.
Oh, no, it is fun to me. It's just not to the average person, I would say, because it's like, objection. This question is compound. This question is an incomplete hypothetical. This question is vague and ambiguous as to the word but. Stuff like that. It's dull to read for most people, but the culmination of discovery is a motion for summary judgment. And that is the last big pretrial motion. And that's what happened in the Ripple case, right? So that's phase 2. So the defendant has a chance to win in phase 1, right? They could say, you don't have enough pieces, motion to dismiss, we win, done. Defendant loses, that means we go to discovery. And after discovery, both parties have evidence. They don't just have pleadings. They don't have words on paper. They have actual documents showing what people said at the time. They have testimony from witnesses taken during depositions. They have declarations of the truth, right? And that are signed under penalty of perjury. And so the court then reviews that evidence. And if the defendant proves that no reasonable juror could possibly find in favor of the plaintiff on the basis of this evidence, Your Honor, I should just win the whole case. Because look, we got evidence and there's no reasonable chance of winning. That said, it's also very hard for a defendant to win at the summary judgment phase because we like going to trials. We like deciding things on the merits. But it is easier than on the motion to dismiss because if the defendant comes forward with actual evidence, the plaintiff has to come forward with actual evidence. Like what they said in their complaint is not enough. They have to bring evidence to that motion in opposition and show that on the basis of this evidence, someone could hold in favor of us.
So phase 1 is cool, right? Everybody can go for a haymaker dismissal, but it's not. You normally probably do get to phase 2.
Right.
The process to get to phase 2 is all the discovery, all the evidence is coming out, and so it just like in the Ripple case, both parties asked for summary judgment, and I feel like Ripple asked for summary judgment because they were confident. I feel like the SEC also asked for summary judgment because they didn't want to look weak. Not that they were confident.
That's a fair take.
Yeah, and so seeing that, Coinbase, we mentioned Grayscale and the Bitcoin ETF. That's pretty much done, right? Grayscale was like the head leader of that, and it came out to a place that's one of the biggest cases we've had, right? The Binance case, we know Binance was doing some weird stuff on the side. They settled, right?
I know the issues with Binance wasn't so much the security side; it was the they were doing some anti-money laundering shenanigans, according to the settlement.
Right.
I don't really want to go to detail.
That one is not even historically relevant to
like the security issues.
When they do classes on this 10 years from now, they're not going to really talk about Binance.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
So you have the ETF battle, right? The court cases and all that. They were relentless. And once BlackRock came in, I guess SEC had to throw the right flag out there, right?
Well, so it was the Grayscale case that made them throw in the white flag. And the reason that BlackRock did decide to come in
is because of that. Yes.
I have worked cases where we're basically trying to prove the same standard, the same legal standard that the Grayscale team had to prove. And let me tell you, it's one of those cases where we advise the client, like, look, you can bring this case. It is theoretically possible that you might win, but the chances are 1%. And you're going to pay us a lot of money in doing it. Are you sure you want to do this? And the reason is because to beat the rational basis standard, you have to show that a government action is arbitrary and capricious. Basically, you have to show that the government is being tyrannical. And that is hard. If there is any speculative reason that could rationally support the decision, it's good to go. Like I could come up with something after the law is made and it's good to go.
Right. So if I could hop in here, the arbitrary and capricious for a judge, for a federal judge to tell a government agency that they're being arbitrary and capricious. That's not a light thing. And the first place where that came out was the Ripple SEC case. And you then saw that repeated in the grayscale case. And then you then saw that repeated in other cases where now these judges they're not dumb. They keep up with current events. They see the strategies that the SEC are using. So I don't take lightly that those phrases were used for the government. And you see now what happened with grayscale and what came out of that. You see now what happened with Ripple and what came out of that. You see now with the SEC versus Coinbase how the judge is going about it. You've detailed to us how litigation comes in 3 phases. To me, I think the Ripple SEC one is done. I think in March there's some sort of proceedings and
well, so Ripple SEC, what they
yes.
did is they stopped it after phase 2, right? Because they could have gone to trial on the individual defendants aiding and abetting claims. I predicted when the summary judgment hearing came out that they were going to dismiss those because that's like 6 months to a year more of work, and you can't appeal a case until there's a final judgment resolving all claims. So they couldn't appeal until that was done. So get rid of it now, just dismiss it. Fine. Now everything's done and we can appeal. Yay, right? Because they want to get rid of that that holding. The SEC's ultimate goal. And so taking it to the Second Circuit as fast as possible and getting rid of the aiding and abetting claims against the individuals, which really were just there as a threat, I'm sure. Like, hey, decision makers, are you sure you don't want to settle this? You're facing individual criminal liability. It's kind of a big deal, right? So that they did, that alone is a huge win off of like Garlinghouse and I forget the other guy's shoulders not having to deal with those claims anymore, because guess what? Double jeopardy applies even if you dismissed it, I'm pretty sure. Don't take that legal advice. Ask a criminal attorney. But yeah, so that's going into the secret 4th phase, which is appeal. And that's going to be oral argument.
We're definitely going to hop into the appeal portion of things because I think that's important to understand. I think, there's dissemination of regulators and legislators, and I kind of want to understand that just a little bit further. All right, I know you can dive in crazy. I just want to understand that a little bit further because as you have these things going on and these court cases going on in this space, you have Gary Gensler who's saying what he's saying. He has a part in the power play as to what can happen. Then you have someone like Elizabeth Warren who's doing and saying what she's saying. She's campaigning on her war on crypto. Yep. And so a little bit of a dissemination between the difference between regulators and legislators. And then we will dig right into what stage the last stages for Coinbase and the SEC looks like and the possible timeline for that. And then the appeal process for any of these cases, but especially the Ripple versus the SEC, because some people are like, hey, they're going to appeal, Ripple's going to lose, and things of that nature. So, well, they appealed the interlocutory appeal, the emergency appeal.
Which I've also done that procedure. So that was it, as expected. That got shot down. You should shoot down the 90% of interlocutory appeals. So that was good on that one. Sorry, but I'll follow your pattern here. You were building.
Yeah, for sure. So just a quick dissemination between regulators and legislators, because I think a lot of times you see Elizabeth Warren tweet and people are like, oh my God, Elizabeth Warren just said the latest thing, or a war on crypto. So just a little bit of dissemination between regulators and legislators, and then just to cap off the Coinbase one, what should we be expecting next coming from the Coinbase, litigation, and possible timeline as to how these things happen?
Sure thing. Okay, so regulators versus legislators. Yeah, you're familiar with the traditional 3 branches of government, right? We have the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch. So the executive branch, they typically, they go out and they enforce the laws. That's what we're taught in like 5th grade civics. The judicial branch interprets and applies laws, is what we're taught in 5th grade civics. And the legislative branch writes down and makes the laws. Regulators are kind of like halfway along the line that exists in the triangle between the executive branch and the legislative branch. So they exist because in the 19th century, as technological innovations were happening super quickly in the Industrial Revolution, we decided that we had a need for specialized lawmakers who could adapt to the needs of a specific industry, right? And the auto industry was a big aspect of this. And so we kind of it is allowed under the Constitution for the legislature, which is Congress. That is the 100 senators and the 300 or whatever many congressmen working together to pass bills that get presented to the president, right? That set of people is our legislators in America. They delegate authority to the executive branch to make some rules. And that is how agencies come to exist. So Congress passes a law in 1920 or 1912 or whatever, I think it was 20 something, to create the Securities and Exchange Commission. And they empower the Securities and Exchange Commission to regulate stocks, bonds, options, and all other investment contracts.
So Congress oversees the SEC. Why does the SEC treat it like it's the other way? But continue.
No, that's a good question. So then the SEC has existed for a long time, and they went back to Congress several times. They've asked for more power, right? And the most recent kind of expansion of the SEC's power was the Dodd-Frank in 2008. And in response to the big financial crisis that happened then, that I've heard 4 different names of now throughout my life. The Great Recession, the Great Financial Crisis, whatever. The big bad, the big sad in 2008. The SEC got even more power. And so over time, what we've seen is the legislature has been delegating more and more of its authority to the executive branch in these agencies. And so now we have an executive branch that includes the president, right? And technically, that's who the SEC reports to, is the president. It's just the scope of what they can do is determined by the words written by Congress back in 1920 something. And the reason that the people like Elizabeth Warren are so influential is because she is a party kind of legislator, right? She is a figurehead for the Democratic Party. She has a lot of influence on the president, who is Gary Gensler's boss. I actually think most of Gary Gensler's decisions come from a Warren mindset kind of leading it, rather than the other way around. I do think what we see now is what we've seen over the past couple of years is the SEC has been begging Congress to give them express control over crypto. The only reason they have an argument towards crypto right now is because of the catch-all term investment contracts. And that literally was just a general term meant to capture any possible thing that, humans can think of crazy words. The words they use doesn't matter. If they agree to like an investment contract, that should be something these people regulate. It was the least regulated form of the word basically until the early 2000s, right? It was not a controversial thing until recently. And it's in these catch-all words that it's the most vague, right? And you have the court interpreted them a long time ago in Howey and kind of try to define what those words meant. That's what we mean by interpreting and applying the laws, right? They had a word, it didn't have a definition, they had to figure it out. So that's what the court did. And the SEC has been using that Howey court decision to slowly kind of push the borders every single time they go to court. We're just going to push it a little bit. And sometimes, most of the time, that push is fine. The courts let it happen. Push. And so that's why we see the expansion of the regulator's power in the administrative state, is because you have Congress has delegated this power a long time ago. The new Congress doesn't have the will or the political authority, right? So it's either like the Republicans don't have enough power, right, in the Congress to actually strike these laws from the books or rewrite them in some way to actually curtail the regulator's power. And the courts over time have just allowed very little reasonable footsteps forward as they kind of go. Like each one on its own looks fine, but then when you kind of look at them in the aggregate, you have this giant, massive expansion of administrative power. And that is why it seems like the regulators are the legislators these days, because they do, in effect, make more of the rules that impact us on a day-to-day basis. The only thing the legislator really does every year is the appropriations bill, right? It's the only thing that ever makes news since Obamacare, in my opinion. So yeah, that is why we've seen that. But one point is that the newly appointed Supreme Court justices did kind of expand what's called the major questions doctrine. And I think this is what we're seeing here is you have the regulators exist over here on the line between the executive and the legislative branch, and the courts are kind of sniping at it with this major questions doctrine, saying, hey, you can't take this vague grant of power and use it to justify a totally different authority that you're now seeking, right? And so power creep, Worm said it pretty well right there. Yeah, power creep. And so I think that this recently created constitutional doctrine is meant to kind of target that power creep.
Yeah. No, I mean that's it's good insight as to where the authority lies between regulators and legislators, and how the SEC, as we can tell, is strategically trying to cut more pieces of certain pies that it has no reason to eat from. And that happens, right? Even in the FBI, the CIA, they all fight for certain things. And we saw in before 9/11 how they refused to communicate with each other, and it took for something crazy to happen for them to say, oh shit, okay, maybe we shouldn't be beefing and we should be trying to communicate with each other. And so you see some of that happening between the regulators and the legislators. And again, I think that there happens to be powerful people, entities, organizations that have now made their way into some of these institutions and are playing their own games, right? And so with that being said, the major questions doctrine is something that we could be looking at, where Congress is figuring out a way to take their power back and to do what? And to try to levy out. You shake your head there.
It's the court forcing Congress to take
the
their
court.
power back.
Oh,
It's the only way I'd change it.
Oh, let's go. I love America. America.
Yeah.
It's America. So we're seeing this happen, right? And then we're also seeing that some individuals in Congress are starting to get really upset. Where they even threatening to subpoena Gary Gensler. And from my opinion, look, y'all been talking and writing letters and all that stuff. Do something, okay? I get it. You guys are playing your hard lines, and it looks bad if his time is almost up, and maybe he wants to know. This guy, okay, has millions, okay? Millions, okay? Stop worrying about some politics of government weakness or whatever. Like, if you're going to subpoena him. Stop talking like this is a telenovela and you're just having us hanging on for the drama, right? So thanks for breaking that down for us between regulators and legislators. And just to cap off, all these court cases and litigation that's happening, we've seen what's happened with the ETF, how Grayscale made some way. We've seen the Ripple case, and like honestly, if they were able to get Ripple in some way deem XRP a security, then my goodness, I still think to this day that the whole entire cryptocurrency space
It would be
has
screwed, honestly.
Has to thank Ripple for having the war chest that they have, has to thank the 75,000 people that decided, you know what, we're just going to go for it. And the fight that we've put on since 2020 is now 2023. The fight continues. But this industry, I don't think it would have been killed, but my goodness, would it have been slowed down if
it would have been
things would've went the
de-Americanized, honestly.
Yeah. Things would have went the other way during the summary judgment. So, the Coinbase, what are we looking forward to? What's happening? What should we be expecting? And if we're at stage 2, how is stage 3 looking like? Talk to us.
So, Coinbase, I anticipate the next thing we're going to see is an order from the court granting and denying, in part, Coinbase's motion to dismiss. I anticipate they're going to grant the motion as to wallet, saying that there is no claim that the Coinbase wallet is itself a security offering, which is frankly ridiculous. I don't even know how the SEC attorneys slept at night writing that one. Then I think it's a 50-50 chance on whether they say the staking service is strong enough to go to court or go through to the phase 2. And I do think that it's likely that the tokens themselves, that one's really hard for Coinbase to win on a motion to dismiss, just because you have to take everything that the complaint says as the truth. So even though the amicus DeFi Education Fund, Blockchain Education Society, whatever, I forget their name, Blockchain Association, that's what I'm looking for. They had great amicus briefs that the court believed. The court said, hey, I think you're misrepresenting staking to me in this complaint.
And can I just ask you something right there specifically while we close this Coinbase thing out on the amicus briefs? In your line of work, that's not a normality, right? And so, and listen, now just tell me if it's not, because for the SEC, a government agency, to sue a specific network or a company that uses the network, and for someone like John Deaton to come in with an amicus brief that's like, hey, I'm interjecting. How often does that happen?
Not super often, but it has happened in multiple cases that I've worked. It happens very frequently in these administrative law cases, which is what the general category, admin law, is what people refer to all of these kind of disputes with regulators. And it's very like I've had one where a California agriculture kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like a PAC, basically. Wrote amicus briefs for me in the trial court in one of my cases. Like, and so it's not totally out. It's like not totally rare, especially given that we're dealing with administrative law, and it's very common for industry groups like Blockchain Association to have an interest that they might want to express to the court separate from the party's interest. That said, in the grand scheme of all litigations, yeah, it's an extremely rare thing. It's generally a sign of societal significance in the case when amicus briefs are allowed to be filed. Because one thing is that the amicus has to first move for permission from the court to even file its brief. So the court has to give them permission in the first place, and that's regularly denied. So the fact that they were able to file one, and so many, the fact that there were so many is also like, that is really rare. You really only get that in like the courts of appeal, Supreme Court, like cases like on abortion, like the big societal issues, the biggest things to everyone. So yeah, the fact that there are these amicus is a big deal.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
The reason I mentioned them though is because during the questioning, the court said like, hey, I understand staking the way the DeFi Education Fund explained it, and it seems that what you wrote in your complaint is just wrong. Am I as the court permitted to take the facts, take judicial notice, which means like if something is just so far beyond dispute, like the sky is blue, the court can take judicial notice of that fact without a party offering evidence that the sky is in fact blue. And so the court was saying, can I just take judicial notice of the facts in the DeFi Education Fund's brief and use those to contradict the facts that you allege in your complaint? Which is like, that's technically allowed. It's kind of an end run around the rules to do that though. So courts don't like to do that because courts have KPIs, everybody. Courts have KPIs.
Key performance indicators.
That's right. Their KPI, biggest one. There's one big one. Reversals. They want to avoid reversals. That's it. And so I think that if that KPI didn't exist, the court might just take the DeFi educations, take judicial notice of those facts. But because I do believe courts have KPIs and that they matter to the courts, to the judges themselves, she's probably not going to do that. And so I think it's 50-50 on whether staking gets past the motion to dismiss. Most likely, probably 51-49 that it will go past the motion to dismiss. And I think for the tokens themselves, they're almost definitely going past the motion to dismiss, because like Coinbase can't get up there and say, no, Algorand is not like the SEC described, because the court just has to take everything in the complaint as true. Like, you're taking it as true. That's just the way the procedure works. Now, as far as what happens next, if Coinbase wins any part of its motion, we stay in phase one, and the SEC has to file an amended complaint, and then Coinbase will have the option to either move to dismiss or file an answer and potentially a counterclaim. And if Coinbase files an answer, which is like that's the pleading, the initial pleading for a defendant, it's called an answer. Excuse me. If Coinbase does that, we've moved to phase 2 of litigation, which is we are then in discovery. Gloves are off. You can start sending interrogatories, requests for admission, requests for production of documents, both parties off to the races, get going. And that will probably, that process in federal courts typically lasts 8 months to a year and a half, I would say.
I can
Depending on the
say
case.
at least a year because I lived through discovery. It was painful.
Yeah, but you were also in a very big case, right? So in like a small case, it could go 6 months. But with that many defendants, yeah, no surprise, at least a year probably for this one, given the number of tokens alleged to be securities. 6. For the record, I think the SEC kind of bit off more than it needed to with that. They could have just gone with 2.
Mhm.
I don't think it would have lost them any arguments, but that's a personal opinion. I'm okay with my opponent taking on more work than they need to, generally.
Yeah, for sure. So stage 2 could last about 7 months to 1.5 years. And will there have to be a determination made on each specific through discovery, or like what, or before you what?
Discovery is very party driven. So I, as the lawyer, will decide what I want to request, and the other side will send me what they want to request, and I'll object, right? Meet with my party, see what I want to actually give them. So that's all very lawyer driven. And the idea is to get the evidence that you need to prove all of your claims, all of them. So it should be driven, there should be discovery directed towards the SEC's analyses, internal analyses, and all of the tokens at issue. That's one thing I'd request. SEC's analyses on certain concepts generally, internal stuff. And I'm very intrigued to see what the SEC is going to request from Coinbase, because I feel like everything Coinbase you need to know for Coinbase is kind of out in the open. It's not like they're relying on a hidden contract term, or some hidden policy to prove this claim. It's all public stuff. So it's interesting. I think the discovery is mostly going to be driven from the Coinbase to the SEC side, trying to get their internal analyses, because what you can do if you have a prior inconsistent statement, like say I had Gary Gensler while he was a professor at MIT saying that Algorand was a future product and was going to be amazing one day. Say this video actually exists and is online. I could take that into court, put Gary Gensler on the stand, and question him about it. Be like, why this prior inconsistent statement? Why do you now disagree with it? Right. So you're looking for stuff like that with those internal analyses is what I'm getting at. And then after the 17, like the year and a half ish at the long end, you're going to get the motion for summary judgment. And if I'm Coinbase, you're trying to move for summary judgment as to every single claim the SEC has. So it's probably going to be significant and might happen over multiple phases. In fact, like, because what is not uncommon, what you can do is bifurcate the issues. So like, hey, we're going to do a motion to these issues and these issues. And the way the judge has kind of already broken things up in her mind from the question.
Oh, that was strange. I think we had a slight cutoff there. I think Styx is going to come back in a few seconds. Let's see. There we go. I'm
back. Where did I cut off? Bifurcation?
Yes.
Okay, so I think there's an easy way for them to bifurcate this one. So they might do that. And that's just cutting it up into manageable pieces. That's all that means.
Okay. Okay.
But we will probably, assuming that we get into phase 2, at the end of that year and a half time period, we're probably going to see a motion for summary judgment. And it's going to dominate the news cycle in crypto. Everyone's going to be talking about it and expressing opinions on it. And if Coinbase loses the motion for summary judgment, that means we go to phase 3, or if no party wins, I should say, neither party wins the case on the motion for summary judgment, then we go to phase 3. And phase 3 is the most intense, the most public, and the one we most recently saw with Sam Bankman-Fried. It is the trial. It is those 10 days, 5 to 10 days of actual trial. That smallest bit is that's the most important part there. That's phase 3 of litigation. And that's when you get up and you put on your show. You show the evidence to the decider. Yeah. No,
that's awesome. To sit in this long drawn out case for this long, I got into it. I was even like, there was a line you can call and then listen to the case as it was going on. And those lines would get flooded. And I think that's what gave the judge an indicator. This is different, right? Because you normally don't get those lines flooded. And that's what gave these federal judges, holy crap. Okay, we are probably the base level. This is probably going to go up higher in these courts. This is possibly history. Let's pay more attention to what we're doing, the decisions that we're making, right? So can
I jump in there? Like what you said, that shit does matter. Like the number of people calling in. Like if I say I represent 72,000 plaintiffs, and the lines listening to the court line, or like you said, are empty, I kind of think you're full of shit, right? And so those soft indicators are actually very important. I have a case that I was working where my clients showed up every day to trial. The other side didn't. And the court, you could tell, didn't really like the other side because of it. So, and I do think what you're talking about, them being full, it does give them a sense of the weight for individuals, not just big companies. Actual people care about this. And that is something that does matter to courts. So sorry to jump in. I just wanted to emphasize what you said there. I do think that's accurate and spot on.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. I think it's important. Those things are important. It's important to show up anywhere, right? And these judges are seeing why these humans find this so important, and throughout that, they're starting to see like their cohorts are behaving a little strange, right? And so you dig into that, you try to find out more. But we'll look forward to what happens with that on the Coinbase case. We'll continue to lean on your expertise. My goodness, how many gems that we are coming in. And we even have a comment from Mega saying, I've learned more today from these two gentlemen than I have since I graduated.
Thank you, Mega.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. And we're going to continue to dig in because all this is important, right? You know, you could think you're the most badass person and you're in the best space in the world. But if they're losing these cases, what does that mean for the overall investment thesis, right? This is history that's being made. They are winning against juggernauts, right? And so it's important to check in on what's happening because that has a lot to do with some of this price action, that is going on. And so, we're going to encapsulate this here by understanding, and getting some feedback on incumbents, disruptors, getting some feedback on regulators, legislators. This is going to be something that we carry out once a month, every month. So one Sunday every month. We're going to continue to do this because look, in the DeFi Kingdoms ecosystem, our content creators, we are dropping information from all sides. We're not just going to focus on just one side. We're going to bring it from all sides and attacking it from this end. I have this topic here. How does this all relate to DFK, right? Because at the end of the day, that's kind of where we centralize ourselves in, even though in this phase we're all about decentralization. And in some way we are still decentralized. And these are people from all across the country, all across the world. This relates to DFK because what? Because you might remember in the early stages where we would see Dreamer pop up and he'd be like, when sex, when sex, when sex, when sex. And Dreamer would come and be very timid. Dreamer would be very timid
about
and
sex.
I'm going to chat with Dreamer at some point. He was very timid about sex, he was very touchy about touching that subject. But he would always be like, well, it costs money and we're talking about it. We're watching regulations and we're watching. And then the Ripple SEC judgment came out. And we saw Ripple, XRP price action go up 100%. And Dreamer, being a Goldman Sachs person, said, and then we saw the Grayscale case start to have rumblings in the back offices, not yet in public, rumblings in the back offices that, Grayscale looks like they're probably going to do this. And so I believe someone in Dreamer's position, seeing what he was seeing, said, bingo. Now we have the confidence to do what? To open up visages or vizies in our shops where we are selling to the people partaking in this ecosystem. Now we can go list on a centralized exchange. So do not think that these litigation cases that are going on do not have an effect on the team, what they're doing, and the confidence that they go in about their decision making, because it does. And so that's where we're going to leave things off for today. I'm going to have Styx give his feedback on his thoughts on what we have here. And we're going to come back with a lot more of these topics moving forward. Styx, what do you have to say about this kind of closeout that I have here?
No, I think it's spot on. You said everything that I would have said, because yeah, it does matter, and it matters for reasons that we've already seen directly, right? It mattered for the sexualized exchange. It mattered for the Vizzies. All regulations matter all the time. You think it doesn't matter for launching a third chain? It does, right? And it's like regulations shape the available options that the DFK team, which is a team that's trying to build something legitimate. And as part of doing that, they're trying to comply with the regulations, even though they don't necessarily may not agree with them, right? Because at the end of the day, if it gets shut down, like if a lawsuit happens, you heard Trade Room talk about it. I have this legitimate thing. It's now suddenly sued by the SEC. What the hell? It mars your reputation, mars your confidence, everything. And so they're trying to their best to protect us from that feeling that Trade Room described. And so, yes, it does matter because these regulations shape the available options for a team that is admittedly very much so in America, right? Not entirely, but very much so. So, yeah, I think you said it really well. I have nothing really crazy to add on that. Yeah,
Very
I like
much
your
so.
close
Very
out.
much so. So yeah, it's yeah, for sure. For sure. It's important. It's important. And as we close out, guys, when we talk about gameplay, you talk about stuff that's happening, we have all these tools, to do what we have to do. We're following some of the game mechanisms that the team has laid out. But remember, this is such an open source, decentralized atmosphere that we have people and guilds launching different tournaments. And really, this is the future of DeFi Kingdoms. I mean, you're literally looking at the future of DeFi Kingdoms. So, Sticks, what do you have going on? What is this Mythic Squad Void Hunt tournament? I know it's getting to the thick of things, but what can you tell our viewers on this?
So, next Saturday, an all-day event is going to be the Mythic Squad Void Hunt Mad Boar Tournament. Currently, we have, let me check here. I can refresh my page. We currently have 17 contestants in the tournament at a 10 jewel prize, a 10 jewel entry. So that's looking at 85 jewel for the winner. But if you go actually to another link, go to the Mythic Squad Medium, just go to the top of this page and click the Mythic Squad Medium. Void Shards, Chettles asked here, are soul binding the Void Shards game related or regulatory? I actually think that's a game related decision. I don't know if I agree with it, but I think it's game related. Go to the facts document there and scroll to the bottom so I can show off the prizes that we're going to be giving out. So yeah, contestants, the champion will win their opportunity. In addition to half of the entry fee, they will get to pick one hero or pet from the treasure chest here. And we do have more additions, and all of these 8 heroes are going to be equipped with a ring. Thanks to, I think it was Ryder or Rabito, one of the two who donated to ALP. And we have more donations coming in. Franz is giving away some summons, even though he's not even in Mythic Squad. So shout out to our friends over in 88K as well. But yeah, sign up for this tournament. The registration is at the top of the page that Trade Room's looking at here. And if you just go look for Mythic Squad on Medium, it's our FAQs page. And where do I sign up? Right there. And yeah, next Saturday, all-day event. I'm going to be releasing a tentative schedule tomorrow for when all of the heats for each round are going to be. And we're hoping to get it all done by Saturday night. I do have some friends from Europe participating, so I will probably need to do them either Friday or Saturday night. So like recording theirs separately. And if you do want to participate from a different time zone, just let me out. I volunteer to stay up as long as it takes on Saturday to get the recordings done for watching everyone live. And Sunday we'll announce who the champion is and do any tiebreaker if one needs to be done.
Yeah, for sure. This is absolutely awesome. You know what happened with me, and this is what a lot of DeFi Kingdoms community got caught with, right? And I'm so aggravated because these prizes look, I mean, these prizes are amazing, man. Some people don't even have mythic heroes, and this is your chance to get in if you're in and you're playing and you prepared properly. I did not prepare properly. I had a bunch of level 10 wizards and I had a good sort of heroes, but what did I not do? I stuck with the Holy Trinity and I did not get good at playing in other ways. And when you mess up like that, now what? Now you're screwed from being able to get into an awesome tournament like this. So guess what I've been doing? I've been trying to practice with the other heroes. So whether you are partaking or whether you're seeing this happen, it's forcing you to engage in the ecosystem more, because why would you want to miss out on this? And I'm very upset with myself, and I'm now on a mission to get good at using the other heroes, because I don't want to miss out on something like this, right? So Dags is in here saying trade. I didn't have a traded team until today. Wow. So what Dags is basically saying is stop being pussy, get your team together, and just hop in. You have what? How long do I have to decide? 4 or 5 days?
Hey, yeah, you got till Friday night to sign up.
Okay. All right. All right. All right, Dags. I hear you.
Hey, and
See,
if this matters, half of my tournament teams, I have dark summoned and leveled them since I announced the tournament, because I needed new teams to beat the challenges that me and Mythic Squad meet up. So
wow.
like, I've been dark summoning level 10s with stones and just kind of really strategically leveling them, trying to get what I need.
Wow.
So it's still possible.
Wow. So it's still possible. It's still, and that's the beauty of the dark summoning. I know on the Jewelers podcast yesterday we were talking about, people saying that regular summons is more valuable than dark summon, but not only are you helping with the inflation of heroes, but you're also getting to put together some really dope heroes for whatever quickly specifically is available to be done, right? So
Right.
there's value in that dark summoning, and that's kind of slept on a little bit as well. But Dags is saying you can run 5 different Trinity teams, though. Four
Right.
different
Yeah.
Trinity
No,
teams,
4 is
maybe.
right. He corrected it
Okay.
correctly there.
Okay.
There's one
Okay.
team with no healer, and one team has to include a hero with no codex. So those are the only two you wouldn't be able to do Trinity if you wanted to go hardcore. I'm only doing the Holy Trinity on one, and that's
Yeah.
the only one where I'm using a priest. None of my other teams have a priest.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. So this is actually super exciting. I'm glad that we can close off with this. Big shout out to the Mythic Squad. Big shout out to you, Sticks, for coming on with us
Thank you.
and being able to give us information that you really just can't find anywhere else, right? I didn't have to put a retainer down for you on this. This is pretty awesome, right? So thank you for that. Look forward to more of these coming every month or so as we continue to dig into the crypto space. I believe this is just as important as gameplay, and this is just as important as price action. Guys, make sure to put your thumbs up, make sure to subscribe, make sure to go holler at Stycksintern's YouTube, Twitter. Where else can we find you as we close out today?
You nailed it. I'm on YouTube and I'm on Twitter. I technically have an Instagram, but that's just to hold it. I don't ever use it. So stick with YouTube and Twitter.
Awesome, awesome. All right, man. So look, big shout out to the chat for coming in, hanging out. Starbuck, Mythic Squad, holler. Of course, Starbuck came in for that one. You guys are doing big things. Shout out to both guilds, right? We're holding it
Yeah.
down and
Agreed.
providing a lot of good content from our community as well. So we'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.